gentlemen, here's another exciting excerpt of the Scouser and the Scot.
Today we have a great show in store for you. We have got Keith from WDFD Records. Keith, how you doing? How you keeping during lockdown?
Oh my goodness, yeah, fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, we're just into it, aren't we? Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. Thank you. Are you?
Yeah, I think everyone's going stir crazy at the moment.
I don't know.
Music is the only thing keeping us all alive, hopefully, and all well. Keith, we're just going to jump straight into the questions, if that's okay with yourself.
Yeah, great.
Can you give us a bit of an insight to how you got interested in music? What was it that got you hooked?
I guess I was probably 13. 12, 13, oh God, yeah, no, 12 would have been, wouldn't I? And was it, I'd been dragged there by my parents to somebody else's house, and they got a son who was just a bit older than me, I think, and they got a portable record player on the floor. Neither of you two are old enough to remember these portable record players. And he got T-Rex Metal Guru. He just bought that day, and I said, "Well, how does that go?" And he said, "Round," which he thought was extremely funny. But he then put it on, and I was just blown away. I'd never heard anything like it because my parents weren't into anything other than sort of classical and a cappella and singing groups and whatever. I'd never heard anything like it. So yeah, I mean, T-Rex was my teenage years and all the glam stuff, Slade, Sweet, and so on. Even Carrie Glitter. Oh God. Yeah, you'd never believe it, would you? Roll forward in time. So that really got me on the musical journey, and then a couple of local bands I auditioned for and did some vocals for a couple of them, and then set up a band, Ulterior Motive, which I don't think we ever gigged out of Birmingham. Because in those days, of course, it wasn't so easy to get about or get gigs. You know, there just wasn't the network that you can form today. We did that. We did a 24-hour charity gig, which was actually what caused us to break up. And we went to Polydor one day. We rolled up to London. We got an appointment with an A&R rep with a cassette in hand. To give them. I remember a Dexys Midnight Runners poster on the wall, and this A&R guy, he couldn't have been snottier if he'd tried, really, to be honest. It was an appalling experience, and after that I got married and had kids and all the rest of it, and just became a fan, really, until the last few years. So that's how I got started. That's how I got started.
So you just mentioned obviously about getting more directly involved again. So can you just talk us through how you actually got involved in music and on the business side of things, how that came about, Keith?
Really, because of my son, Kyle, who fronts Thea. As you do, with your kids, you take a keen interest and support. Luckily, he plays music I love. I don't know how supportive I'd have been if he was a rap or grime artist, but I'd still have wished him well. But it was, I think, because he was brought up on, listening to my stuff. It's good when you've got kids as a captive audience in the car. You can stick it on, and that's it. They don't get a choice. Until now, these days, my lad hijacks it with the Bluetooth. I'm listening to something and suddenly someone else comes on the car. I thought, what the hell? But yeah, it was through Kyle, who fronts Thea, and really it just snowballed of its own accord. I mean, it wasn't a grand plan in the start. Obviously, there was very humble beginnings. It started off as a school band. And then just gradually, as we managed to get them a few local pub gigs, and luckily, or not, some days it grew from that into to whatever it is today. Do you want me to expand more on the WDFD story?
Well, I was just going to ask you the next question. You're jumping ahead of me already. When did you actually launch WDFD? What was the reason behind it? How did you decide I'm going to start my own label?
It was 2017, and it was purely because at that time Planet Rock wouldn't play a band unless they were signed, and we didn't know how to get signed, or if even if anybody would have signed us. So I just thought, why don't we just form our own record label and then you'll be signed? It seemed like too easy to do it, but that was it. And Ditto, who were the platform we'd used to upload some tracks, they were offering record label in a box for, I don't know, 150 quid or something. Still got the box. Well, it's quite a nice box actually, and certificate, and it just came with a formed company. You just go on Company's House then and change the name and whatever, and suddenly you're a record label, and then it's like, oh God, what do I do now? I've got no business experience of that. I mean, I'm a businessman in the day job, but never run a record label, and so my experience was very limited and mostly from the outside. I got one or two contacts, but it was like, where do we go from here? And there was never at that stage any intention of taking it further than it just being there. It was purely a platform, a vehicle for them. We did eventually get played by Planet Rock. Well, that's good. Twice.
That £150 in that box was the answer to everything then.
What an investment, eh?
I think, to be honest with you, speaking to you beforehand, and as you know yourself, I work with a lot of bands, and obviously Ian's in a band. So I think there's a lot of people don't understand record companies and what they used to be, or they hark back to the days when they were the behemoths that controlled everything to what they are now. Can you talk us through the process of setting up WDFD from right at the start, and kind of give us some idea of the difficulties you had? Because just you said yourself you had no idea, you kind of did it for one reason, and it's growing legs. So if you just talk us through that initial process, please, Keith, that'd be great.
Yeah, as I say, it was really only when it became apparent that other people were interested in it that became an issue, because when it was just a case of being a vehicle for theatre, I didn't really need to do anything else with it. But I got talking to the guy who was looking after the Howling Tides, or Anonymous as they were at the time then, who was asking about it and interested and whatever, and I said, well, come on if you want, it's not a problem, good lads and all the rest of it. Again, not really thinking forward, there wasn't and hasn't been until recently really a proper business plan in place. So it was trying to, and same with you, John, it's all about just trying to help the bands. It's purely there as a tool to try and get more momentum for them, to get them noticed, just to get their hand somewhere above the crowd that's waving at whoever it is, the gatekeepers, these mythical people who can suddenly transform things for your band. I didn't have the money, still don't have the money to operate as a traditional record label. So I'm not in the business of handing out advances. And again, I've really come to understand just what a double-edged sword they are, and how many bands, staggered me when I really started to dig into it, just how many bands that I thought were hugely successful and rich were absolutely shafted by the record companies and ended up bankrupt or whatever, despite having a life of fame on the outside, they're actually, very poor in terms of pounds, shillings and pence for all the work they've done. So I've never wanted to recreate the same sort of model. I'd love to have the money to do things more, because money, unfortunately, still speaks. It's still the thing which can buy you that extra. And I don't mean in terms of bribes or anything. I mean purely in terms of marketing and publicity. If you've got that extra money to if you could do some TV adverts or whatever, then suddenly you take things to a whole different level. That's just the way it is. So for the bands, it's just purely about providing a framework. And I guess in some ways, as I say, John, it will have similarities to yourself. It's providing them with a home. It's providing them somewhere to interact, to bounce things off each other, to learn from each other. And where we can hopefully try and hone their skills, give them what advice we've got. There's no magic one. We've never professed to have one of those, but just to help them improve their craft generally, on and off stage. It's vitally important. We've found a lot of bands who may be great on stage, but they're complete dickheads off stage. And it's just making sure that you are the complete package, because it's a very crowded and competitive market. And rock is quite a small market within a big market at the moment. You've really got to be something special to stand out. And even then, it's what you want is a record. We can see ourselves, WDFD, as a feeder for larger things, and obviously that's what we want, is the bands to go on to bigger and better things. But it may be that a traditional record deal is not the right thing for a band anyway. As a view, they want back, along with the deeds to your house and your firstborn and all the rest of it. There's no free lunch at all, if there ever was. So bands have to think very carefully about what it is they want and what success means to them. We'd all love to be rich and make money off it, well, say all, there'd be very few who wouldn't like to do that. But in the real world, you've then got to decide, as we're finding at the moment, what is it that drives you? Is it being on stage for that half hour? Is that the be all and end all? Or is it that you want to be interviewed by Lorraine Kelly, or you want to be doing whatever? I do.
Got a little soft spot there, have you, Keith?
A little soft spot for the Scot.
I just don't like an accent.
Yeah, it is. You be careful, John. I'll be after you. Yeah. So I've waffled a bit there. I'm sorry. I do tend to lose my train of thought, but that's what WDFD is trying to be. It's trying to be a home for bands, help them to grow, help them to look at all the aspects. Have you got your insurance? Have you got your PR? Have you got your whatever that's necessary, your marketing? Have we got all these things in place? Have we got a campaign? Have we got a strategy? What is it you're trying to achieve? Where are we trying to get? Are you trying to get big in Germany? Are you trying to get big in Wales? What is it you're trying to do? And how is it we're gonna get there?
Trying to do it in a budget of zilch, which is what most bands have. I mean, it makes
Absolutely.
me. I mean, you're bound to come across it yourself, but I find it quite well. I was going to say funny, but it's actually not funny when you hear about such and such a band and they're breaking it through, and I'm like, yeah, breaking through what? Well, they've got this, that, and the next thing. Oh, it's great. Do you know how much it's cost them to get to that stage? And do you know that I can still book them as a promoter for probably about 350 quid, even though they're 30 grand in debt to get to the stage they're at? You do the arithmetic. And it's this smoke and mirrors that gets right on my tits, I'll be honest with you. And this is what happens. And the problem is, in this making it in rock, as you alluded to yourself, it's a glass ceiling. It's a very, very small market. And there's too many people trying to live off the back of bands' dreams. And one of the things that I was told about you before I ever spoke to you was that you weren't like that. And I think that's why you're always referred to Sir Keith, because because for what you did for the musical charity that is rock.
I'm sure there's an in-joke that I'm not party to there, but yeah. Well,
oh no, I can assure you, it's always said because people appreciate you and like you for what you're doing because of where your heart is for the bands, and I can tell you that 100%. But it is, and it's like, but record companies, people still hark back to the days of, oh yes, so and so gets signed for £500,000, and yeah, but that was £500,000 alone.
Yeah.
And then they were working, and then the record company owned, I think it was 90%. I've just read White Line Fever, Lemmy's autobiography, and he made more money out of 4 songs he wrote for Ozzy than he ever did out of Motorhead and all their albums that they shifted because of the record company and because of the management they had over the years. I mean, and he's far from alone with that.
No, absolutely. And it's always been smoke and mirrors, and bands didn't understand what they were signing, I'm sure, or that they were off their heads, or they were just swept along on euphoria, which is understandable.
Oh,
and there weren't people to guide them, very often. And at the end of the day, it's business. So, we can all rant and say how unfair it is, and yes, it is morally, but it is business. So those people, they're making an investment. They frankly don't care. They're not bothered whether you're Lemmy or whoever. Yeah. That's they're there to make a return on their money. That's the way it is, whether we like it or not. And that is still there as well. It's just that the big deals, there isn't the longevity. And again, it's easy to blame the likes of Simon Cowell, and there's I think there's an element of truth in that, in the instant fame and success that can come along. But as we've seen, how many of those ever go on to achieve anything longer term? So from a band, again, it always comes back to, where's your heart? What is it you're trying to do? And let's get real about it. Think about it, because you're absolutely right, John. Yeah, if you want somebody to throw £500,000 at you, no, they're not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart. They want something in return for it. They want a hell of a lot of it.
It's like a lottery, that though. That's like your Premiership elite players.
Yeah.
And to be fair, as you said, it is a loan. Yeah. And if they're not getting that money back, you're not going to be there for long, and you've got to stand up to what their demands are.
Well, that's it. It's a loan that has got to be repaid. So even if you fail, you're still in debt to them. It can ruin you, and you're not going to earn until you've paid that loan either. So
the one which shocked me was Alter Bridge. I don't know if you've heard, their first album, they had to buy it back off the record label.
Yeah.
They're still paying it back at the moment.
Really?
It is. You want to read up on it? It's a shocker. I couldn't believe it when I first heard it. I thought it was a multi-million-pound album, but
well, it is for somebody.
Someone's making a lot of money off it. But I don't think it was the band off the first.
No, absolutely.
The analogy I use with our bands when they're talking about, can you get us a record deal? I'm saying, right, well, here's the reality. So I'll lay them out. I says, just think about it this way. Think about the Dragon's Den in TV, and you're getting in there and you're wanting to give away 5% for £100,000. And then the first thing they're going to want is 35% because of the value of the ad. I says, that's what you're talking about. They're investors. They don't give a shit about you. They just either see you as a money-making machine for them or not. They are investors. It's as simple as that.
That's the big labels anyway. As I say, they're the major labels. What we want to try and understand is, if someone's coming along, Keith, and goes, I can set my own label, I can do this. Yeah. What hidden charges, costs, and monetary issues have you stumbled across just by setting up a label? Because I'm sure there's been a few challenges along the road from 2017 where you've gone, why am I doing this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I had another one of those today, and yesterday. It's been a privilege. It's been a real privilege and a real honour to do this, but it's hard work. There's no doubt. And I had no idea, because again, it wasn't, as I said before, it wasn't what I started out to do particularly. Now we're at a stage where I would love to be able to give up my day job and do this properly full time. But again, without the backing, the financial backing, it's impossible. It's cost me a lot of money so far. I have not taken a penny out of WDFD, and that isn't likely to happen in the foreseeable future. There is nothing there. It's all been outlay. It's been sponsorship of festivals. We've done 2 free compilation CDs that had to be bought and paid for and distributed free. Various other initiatives. Because if you're going to support, if you're going to put your money where your mouth is, and walk the walk and all those cliches, that's what you've got to do. And again, it's going back again to what John alluded to and so on. I'm doing it because I don't want to see my son shafted. That's where it's so. Oh, you hear so many things, and it still goes on, unfortunately. Today, it's too easy to fleece anyone. Certainly bands, when they're talking of their dream, it's very easy to promise the earth and deliver nothing. And oh, by the way, let's have some money off you along the way, and I'll open these doors and I'll do this and I'll do that. Sounds wonderful. And that's not to say there aren't genuine people out there as well. I'm not trying to scare the bejesus out of every band. Don't trust anybody. You've just got to do your due diligence. You've got to ask the questions. You've got to ask around and say, right, has this actually worked for anybody else who has done this? And, just look into things. So, yeah, it has been a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge, just trying to grow. Again, so going off at a bit of a tangent here, perhaps, so stop me if it's not relevant, but there's so much dependence on social media. And that is, again, a real double-edged sword. It's very, very difficult. John, I know you post an awful lot through Forge. Again, trying to get noticed, some great content and stuff, but you're the same as me. You probably look at the response at times and you think, well, why? What am I doing? What is going to get anybody's attention? Some great videos out there that bands put their time and money and effort into, and then they get a few hundred views. And you could almost cry for them, because you just think, that's brilliant. Somebody should be watching that. So again, if you've got the budget, you can buy that traction so that more people will see things. But without that, it's really difficult. So constantly trying to come up with new and innovative ways to get the bands noticed. It's not about WDFD. It's lovely, and you've got to have a brand. I think you I've got to be very careful it doesn't go down the ego trip that way. But WDFD isn't anything. It's just a shell. That's all it is at the end of the day. It's a platform. It's something to facilitate what the bands do. But we're trying to build that brand awareness as well, because hopefully if people think, I've heard WD, yeah, that rings a bell. Oh yeah, so and so's. You start to associate it, as hopefully do with Forge as well. Oh yeah, I'll check out the other bands on this, because they obviously know what they're looking at and looking for. So we want to try and do that, and obviously again trying to attract promoters and the like, so that your bands get a chance to get to play bigger and better things. Because again, when gigs come back, I think there's going to be a real scrap go on there. And again, more bands will get shafted, I'm afraid. But, you've got to get out and you've got to sell your merch. That's one of the few places where you can still try and make a bit of money to reinvest in your gear and your fuel and your food and your studio time.
I mean, one of the things, I agree with everything you've said there, and we're the same thing. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I made personally with Forge, because that was the first part of the business, was I was so intent in making it all about the bands that's what I did do. But then somebody quite smart said to me, no, John, you need to spend the next 6 months making Four Jump the brand that people recognise that will then attract them towards the band. So I made that mistake. And once I started doing that and the Forge Ahead initiative, and it's still about the bands, but you do have to spend the time making yourself attractive in order to bring, attract more people to look at what you're selling, what you're marketing, and that's right. One of the things that I've been lucky enough or unlucky enough, however way you look at it, that a few of my bands recently have had approaches from record companies, etc., and I've seen quite a variance between contracts and the legalities. Can you, and obviously you can only talk about your own, can you talk us through, for the perspective of a band or bands listening to this, can you talk us through the legal side of having a record label, specifically when it comes to the relationship between WDFD in your case and the bands, if you're happy to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. It was an important point. I specifically made a very conscious decision at the start that I didn't want, if there was any way at all I could avoid any chance of legal problems or just nastiness, then I would avoid it. So my first contract I drafted was 2 pages long. I think it now goes to 2.5. I don't think, and certainly the feedback I've had from bands is they've never seen one as simple. And that's purely because, it's for my benefit as well as theirs. I don't want anybody coming back to see me. I don't want, I'm too old and poor for people to come back and say, oh, you promised me this, or, in legal battles. Again, partly born out of experience of watching what's happened in 1 or 2 other things, where that sort of nastiness can whoever's on the right side or the wrong side, it depends where you're standing, but it can ruin you mentally as well as financially, and destroy a band. So I kept it very, very simple. Don't lock anybody in. They want to walk away, they can. Certain safeguards, obviously, if we have given an advance, which we haven't so far, but if we do, then that's got to be repaid. But for all the bands at the moment, if they want to walk away tomorrow, they can, and shake hands and off you go, because I'd rather wish anyone well who wants to do that. If somebody doesn't want to be part of what you're doing anymore, that's their choice. But as I say, obviously, I understand with other contracts, I've seen 1 or 2, but clearly, once you start getting into the business of giving a band money, yeah, it's going to take on a different depth in terms of the legalities.
Yeah.
So, because you are making an investment then, unless you are a wealthy sugar daddy who's just going to say, "Yeah, boys, there's 10 grand to go and make your album." Don't worry about it.
No, it makes perfect sense.
So
on a different note, let's talk about a bit more personal to yourself, because obviously you pick your bands for your label. How do you actually decide what band you go, I like that band, I want to sign it to my label? How do you go through, what's your process for picking a band, and how do you go about it?
Cash in a brown envelope is obviously number 1.
I wish.
Yeah.
Keith, I'll call you later.
So will I.
I'd say sexual favours, but no.
Lunch and vouchers, mate. Lunch and vouchers.
It's again, this has been a learning curve, and where I am today was very different to where I was in 2018, say, when we were expanding rapidly, and I don't regret that for 1 second, or any of the bands that we took on at that time. But you do learn as you go along that you've got to look for certain attributes if you're going to make the thing work. By which simple things like, very lucky to have Hell's Addiction on the label. Absolutely stupendous rock band. But I don't necessarily want half a dozen Hell's Addictions. We've got Thea, who, a bit more perhaps middle of the road, or without that sounding derogatory, there's more of a crossover there. You've got Verity White, who's a very different artist again, Fourth Labyrinth. So I do look now for diversity, for not necessarily gap filling, but not to repeat things. Because again, I don't want to be in a position where you think, oh yeah, well that suits so and so, and you're trying to pick your favourite son. You want to be able to concentrate your efforts properly where opportunities are. So whilst it's all still within the rock genre, it is a very broad church. I don't even know whether we need genres and whatever these days, and I think that is a problem in itself, and the image it conjures up to some people. But that's a different story. So yeah, in terms of answering your actual question, come on, is looking at can you work with them? Egos are out. If you've got an ego, that's fine. That's who you are. That's who you are. And a lot of driven people, a lot of very focused people will become very successful by doing that. Fair play to them. Whether or not you like them, whatever, that can work for some people. So I don't decry that. But in terms of trying to be within an organisation, it's almost impossible. You just if you're going to be in constant conflict, you just don't need that. Particularly if you're not making any money from it, it's like, hey, I don't need this. So I always look for people who are team players, really. I want them to. Everybody wants to be successful, of course. Everybody wants that prime slot, that prime gig. Again, you don't want people who haven't got that ambition, but what you don't want is them trampling over people to get there. So, I want Verity to cheer on Thea and vice versa. I want them to celebrate the successes and share their posts. Wrong, and sometimes question it, but I just think that's the right way. I think fans like that. I think fans like to see bands supporting bands rather 100%. Than bad-mouthing them or being in competition. Yeah, and that comes across, John. I think that again, it's the same ethos. That's why I had that banner on there is room at the top of the mountain for more than one band. It isn't an X Factor competition in that sense. We're not trying to be the winner. They can all get there if they're good enough and if they have the luck.
I think, to be honest, that's one of the things which I always try and tell the lads, definitely in King Voodoo anyway, is stick around to watch the other band, show support, be seen, be helpful, get into it and enjoy your night with them. Because, as I say, it reflects, it bounces back, and then you build up a rapport with the other bands, and then you support in the other bands right the way through.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't always do it. I accept that. Not every time. Sometimes you've got to get back for whatever reason. So you make your apologies and go. It isn't a must do. But what does it say about you otherwise if you're not interested in the other bands? You're not. Because it's arrogant, really. You can learn from other bands. That's how you learn. You've watched your idols before to get there. You watch and you listen and think, oh, that's good, or that didn't work, or yeah, I could do that, or I like those lights, or stage costume. There's so many things you can learn on any gigs, as well as networking, as you say, and then hooking up and saying, right, yeah, can we support you and you support us, and do all that. So yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if there's a young band or young musicians, new band watching this just now, I mean, you must have had the scenario more than once where you've gone to see one band for whatever reason, and there's another 2 bands on, or 3 bands, and in effect you actually don't like, or there's something about the band you actually went to see that you didn't like, and you've ended up being more attracted to the other ones. So what are the kind of must-haves for a, you know, if you were suggesting something to young musicians, the do's and the don'ts, you know, don't do this, don't do that. If you want to attract interest, you know, this is what you need. What, could you put that down in a handful of things? You know, the must-haves. You know, like you already mentioned about ego. I think there's a difference. I think there's a difference between personality and ego. You can have a big personality and be a showman, but you don't necessarily need to be an arse. You know, and I think it's from my perspective, it's getting that. I don't have anybody in ours that I can think of. You know, like if you've ever seen Sour Tusk, Nick has got a fantastically huge personality, you know, but he's got no ego as when it comes to, he's a team player, you know, and I love that about him. So, you know, can you give us some of these young guys an idea of what you look for as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously it's personal, and what I would look for might not be what somebody else or another label would look for. But I was just wondering if you were stalking me before, John, because I ended up doing exactly that, where I went to watch one band and ended up eventually signing the other one because, you know, just particularly blown away by them. Yeah, it's something which, for me, you've always got to stand. You need to stand out. I'm a believer. I think again, maybe it's because I grew up with the glam era and all the rest of it. I mean, I've no idea whether Alice Cooper was a dickhead or David Bowie was a dickhead or Mark Bolan or whatever. So, you know, I'm much luckier now in that I can see somebody on stage and then I can go and have a chat to them and think, oh yeah, that's pretty. Oh God, yeah, you're an absolute twat. Or no, you're not. So, but I like a performer. You know, I've never enjoyed watching bands who stare at their feet. You know, now I accept that some guitarists, some people or whatever, that's just the way they are. They're just uncomfortable or whatever it is, and they're not made for the stage in that way. So that's, you know, that's not their fault. But personally, I don't find that exciting. I want to be entertained if I watch a live show, within reason. You know, I don't necessarily. I remember Heaven's Basement or whatever. I got very scared that I think it was Aaron who was climbing up these bloody things, and I thought, Jesus, this is going to end badly. So, you know, and you know, fire breathing and whatever. There are limits, I suppose, but you've got to push the boat a little bit. I think. There's an awful lot of Me Too out there, an awful lot of samey stuff. It's difficult to stand out. I know that, and it's far easier for me to say do it than because I'm not having to do it. So I look for a band who can deliver. You know, you've got to have, for me again, come back to the criteria, you've got to have the complete package. You've got to show that you're empathetic, you're sympathetic to, particularly at the moment with what's going on in the world generally. I like to see a band that's on social media who's interacting with their fans, trying to build them up, being supportive, not just saying, oh, buy my merch, watch my video, whatever, who are trying to understand what their fans are going through. I think that's important. Making great music goes without saying, even though that's difficult to define. But in terms of the live shows and whatever, it is about standing out, just delivering, just that passion that, you know, you can see when somebody's in it, in the moment or not. And then particularly off stage, I think that's just as important, particularly at a grassroots venue. It's not like you're getting on your go-kart and going back to the hotel or whatever as a megastar. You should be out there socialising with the audience, and that's where you learn probably most about the band and the people, is how they're treating people off stage, and again talking to the techies, you know, to the sound people, to the promoters, whatever, and just, you know, what have this band been like to work with? Have they helped promote the gig? Have they actually done anything towards it? Were they rude and obnoxious to the sound guy, you know, trying to get the right sound for them, or were they helpful and polite and grateful? Have I gone off on one again?
No. I think that's spot on, because I think it's the things that it's the things I look for in bands as well. Do they entertain? Are they there to entertain? Do they realise that their job is to entertain? Do they look at things from the perspective of the customer experience? You know, and obviously they've got to have the songs and they've got to be that, but all the things that you've added to that, the business side of things, is spot on. I think you nailed it. I think it's great advice for any young musician watching this.
There's a lot of competition out there, so, and there's going to be even more, I think. And say, you know, why should somebody come? That's what you've got to ask yourself. Why should somebody come to see me?
Yeah.
You know, very often they can't get their mates out to see them after the time. So what is going to make somebody spend a £5 or a £10 coming to see you? What are you giving them?
Yeah, I agree.
So what's been your toughest lessons setting up the label, like now over the last couple of years? What's been the biggest challenge that you've experienced?
That's a good one.
That question.
Yeah.
I'm not taking that question.
I think probably a couple of things. I think one has just been the learning curve recently again with publishing royalties. That's all streams and the royalties from those, and you're playing down, and then it's like publishing. Well, isn't that okay? And when I looked into it, I realised that some bands were not claiming things we could claim, so rectifying that. So it's the learning curve generally on the business side of things. Just all the practical things. Again, luckily, because I've got a business background, doing getting the accountant and all that wasn't really a problem. But for anybody else doing it who hasn't got that sort of experience, it's just, you're running a company. So it's that sort of thing on the practical side can be a learning curve. And I think the other one was really just learning what works and doesn't in terms of the bands. And what you're trying to deliver, because you've got all these hopes and dreams of what you can do, and then the reality is that you can only do so much. You can only do what you can do, and some days that's good enough, and other days you feel it isn't. So it can get very, very frustrating at times, and I do have times of great excitement and hope and whatever, and I do have times where genuinely you just think, what the hell is this all about? Are we ever going to have the sort of success or triumphs for the bands that we want, or are we just allowed to swear in this, pissing in the wind? Is it worth the effort and the hassle? Because that's what it is. It is effort. As I say, there's no money in it. There's not a penny come back the other way. So it is just, is it, particularly without gigs as well, because at least when I was going out to gigs, you sort of felt more connected. You're getting that buzz, and you really, and it's been so dry really for 10 months and it's going to be probably another 5 or 6 months away, it's looking. So you're just sort of doing things not in a vacuum, but you're just doing things with no real end output apart from the odd track that I've got a track we've recorded, or so it's very difficult at times like this.
100%. Yeah, I think hardest thing has been trying to see your way through this when there's no end, when there's no And that brings us on to the final question, really. From your perspective, as much as you can see currently, what are the short, medium, and longer term future for WDFD as you see it currently, Keith?
I think the short term is for this year, for the first 6 months of this year, because I say it's hard to see. I'd love to see it, but it's hard to see bands getting back out properly before the summer. Might be the odd one again, or we might get some odd live stream stuff. So it's more about consolidation. It's more about the background stuff we're doing. I've been very lucky to have Dave O'Hara, Keith Large, Chris Stones. Again, purely voluntary, just coming in to help and give some further advice and kick me up the arse in certain places and just say, yeah, this is right or this is wrong. So it's getting that structure in place properly, because I'm probably at a bit of a point where I could go either way. I could either just keep it as a hobby and really just go back to the concept as it was originally. It's mainly for theatre. We'll just do that, or to try and make it more significant. I feel, even though I've just turned 60, that let's try and make something of it if we can. So that's what we're trying to do in the medium to longer term. Then is to just try and put as many pieces as we can of the jigsaw into place, make link ups, make networks. We're all trying to get. We all want Andy Copping on speed dial or whatever, but it's trying to get the. I don't expect any favours in life. All I want is for people to give the bands a fair listen, and that's the biggest problem with most of the stuff with the glass ceilings and so on. We know it goes on. They'll say, oh yeah, you submit to play XYZ festival, yeah, boom, along with 500 other people. What are the chances that they'll actually listen to your submission? I'll tell you what the chances are. Cool. And it's down to who you know. It's down to who you know. So it is trying to build that. Treat people as you'd want to be treated, and see if we can just grow something and open the doors for the future. And hopefully somebody will have a #1 album or something, and we'll be able to get money to reinvest to make it bigger. But I'd like to forge alliances, certainly on the gig side of things, because I think that is going to be a problem in the future. I can see a lot of, if not pay to play, then it'll be it'll be ticket splits at the grassroots level a lot of the time, which is understandable. Promoters aren't going to want to necessarily guarantee fees of any significance until we see people come back in sufficient numbers. But that's extremely difficult for bands. It's how do you go and play in Newcastle upon Tyne if you're from Southend and you've got no following? So you on a ticket split. Because you're not going to sell any tickets.
Yeah, I think one of the other challenges which a lot of people don't understand, it's not just the band, and it sounds daft, but you've got all your sound engineers, your lighting, your road crew, everyone who helps out behind the scenes. There's so many people who are impacted with it at the moment. It's heartbreaking. The industry is on its knees. Let's face it.
It's massive. I sadly spent 2 hours of my life earlier listening to evidence being given to the parliamentary committee about music festivals. I got a link and listened in. It was actually very interesting. But that was the message. We are going to, if they don't get significant help. I know we had the Cultural Recovery Fund, but it hasn't fed down everywhere it could, but so many freelancers have had no help at all. And if we lose their skills, it's going to be, even if venues survive, which now with the new lockdown, God knows, we've seen places like the Waterloo, they've been tremendously supported, and really hope places like the Waterloo can survive. The station in Cannock so on. There's loads of them. I've got my Save Our Venues t-shirt on.
Good man.
Yeah, it's going to be. They've got this far, perhaps thinking there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and now it's almost snuffed out again in the short term financially. Really, really difficult. So I hope they'll survive. Venues can reopen, but you haven't necessarily got the skills, as you say, and have you got the right sound guy anymore? Is your sound gear even still working after being mothballed? Who's going to do your lights? Who's going to do your promotion? Who's going to do whatever? And the festivals, they're already saying really today, the chances of the 2021 big festivals going ahead is pretty remote.
See, I know we discussed this before the call, like before we started all the videos and stuff like that. I think it is key that we, the funding, if the government do decide to give the funding to the big festival, that doesn't help the grassroots. Now, if there's no grassroots, there's no big bands coming up in the future. Yeah. So the funding's got to drive down all the way down to the grassroots, and it's the scary scenario where the music industry really needs some help and support, and that's from bands, everyone. Everyone needs to help out.
Yeah, it's massive, and to be fair, the people giving the evidence today, who were representatives largely from the bigger festivals, were saying exactly the same things. You look at the wildfire. You look at Call of the Wild, you look at Rockwitch, you look at Love Rocks, so many great festivals. I'm going into trouble now for forgetting to mention certain ones, but but it's not just a great family, community, whatever thing. It brings a lot to the area, all the B&Bs, the hotels, the cafes, and so on. So yes, it's huge.
I think that's
huge. Would you believe I don't normally talk? I bored John to death. John's actually died.
It froze on me. I think from my perspective, there's two things that I think about it, which is the money that does come down. I have a fear, just like what's happened with professional football, where the Premier League have sucked up all the money and the EFL's been left. And I think there's a danger that will happen as well with the money in the music industry. And I think the problem will be if people who have not earned the money in 2020 they expected to earn, try to make it up in the short term by short-changing bands or fans. And that's my worry. But I also have a second bit to it, which is you don't miss something until you can't get it. And I think, and let's not be kidded here. We've all been at venues and Ian's played them where the crowd has been quite low and you've had brilliant bands on. And there was an apathy before this happened. I really and truly believe, and this is even my promoter's head on here, I really and truly believe that once this COVID side gets out and the gigs start, as long as we do it well and we get the right band, I think we'll have much bigger crowds than we did before, because the apathy has gone, because people have missed it so much.
I really hope you're right, John, and I think there's an excellent chance that I think the only thing, without being the devil's advocate or the harbinger of doom, is that some people who are of an older age, which excludes all of us, but you may feel, do I want to go back out in the same way I used to? And that's been a problem with the rock scene for a long time, in my opinion, is the older age of the fans. God bless them. They're wonderful and they're my friends. It's fantastic. But we've got to reach younger fans at some point.
And that was one of the things with the Forge Ahead initiative. It wasn't just about helping young musicians. It was trying to use them, if you like, to try and attract their peer group to come and see what it's like to see a live rock band or a live country rock band or a live metal band and get it, because the kids don't get the chance to see that now. Simple as, they just don't get it. And I think that's the thing that we need to be looking at. Beyond that is, we can see a problem with certain age groups because they're scared. then what are we going to do about it? Hope it goes away, or are we going to go and try and do something to attract young? And that might be 14 to 18-year-old gigs.
Do you know what? I was just going to say that. It's like the lack of, I know it sounds daft, but dry bar gigs where it's like, you know, I've played gigs many a times where people have gone, right, okay, get out, you're not old enough. And you sort of think, well, the venue, and I'll be honest, the rock scene and the metal scene is one of the best scenes around for people to support people, help each other out and take care of each other. And if I see a young person in that crowd, they're not in any danger at all, because they are being looked after by that crowd and they will look after them. And I think, I just wish that for the unsigned bands, the grassroots bands, the bars use a little bit of common sense and say, come into the venue, we're fine with this, as long as you're not drinking, you're okay, and you're chaperoned with someone, that's fine. It's like, you know, I think that's the biggest problem, where they're not having the opportunities to come out to these venues and experience a live gig and go, I can do that. And then they want to get on stage, they want to sing. Like yourself, when you did T-Rex for the first time, I bet you went, I am going to be the next Mark Bolan. Guarantee. You know what I mean?
For me, it was Roger Daltrey. The first time I heard The Who, my older cousin played it, and I was like, what is that? I don't care what you look, I want to be him. And it was Roger Daltrey. Never achieved it right enough, but never mind. They thought they could.
But no, you're right. You catch that. And if the kids don't see it, they're not gonna. You know, mostly when younger people, oh God, it sounds so condescending, but you know, when they see or hear it, they love it.
Oh, 100%.
But they're not getting the chance to do it, and that's partly, you know, I don't want to go with me dad. Some do, and that's lovely. When you see a father and son, you think fantastic. But that's probably the exception rather than the rule. Most of the time, you know, when I wouldn't wanted to go to a gig with my dad. You know, not just because he didn't like the same music as me. I wouldn't want to go with my dad. You know, I wanted to do, you know, after T-Rex, it was all punk. You know, that's when I was 17, 18. It was like, yeah. So, and again, that's the fire that's got to be lit for the younger generation. They're not going, trying to get me started again. They're not going to be attracted. The younger generation are not going to be attracted to people who look like they've stepped out of the 70s and 80s. They've done that. There's nothing wrong, you know, if that's what you want to do, that's absolutely cool. But you've got to accept then that, I say, they want to identify with something that's for them. We all do when we're that age. It's got to be your thing.
And the other thing is, Keith, it's how you approach it. I was having a conversation with a chap this afternoon who's coming on to do work for us as part of our team, which we're going to announce tomorrow night. But it's one of the things we're looking at is to try and attract the younger thing. There's no point putting it on Facebook. The kids will not see it. TikTok's the answer. So my challenge to him was, how do we make hard rock fit TikTok?
Yeah.
How do we get our message out in TikTok? Because that's the only way these kids are going to see it. Because my daughter's through the wall there. She's coming 15. And that's all she does is TikTok. Everyone's TikTok. Yeah. It's all music based. There's always music in the background. It's just never rock. Yeah. So I think, to me, that's the other thing. I've already vowed that once I start promoting again, we will be doing these 14 to 18-year-old gigs, well, under 18 gigs. And I've got venues set up and we're going to do it. But I've also got to advertise to them. And I can't do it in social. I can't do it in Facebook. Well, I can, but it won't get to it. So it's that. But people need to, this is a conversation that people need to be having. How are we going to help the next generation? Because they can't see the old grey whistle test. They can't even see Top of the Pops. They can't see the Tube. All they get is Capital Radio, and music's been devalued that much. It's just background noise now. So what are we going to do about it?
Absolutely. Spot on. Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that if we're to have a future, and if WDFD, from my point of view, if it's going to have a future, that's what's got to happen. Just say, like, I will repeat, I love the rock crowd that's out there.
Oh,
But for the grassroots to flourish and grow, we have got to attract those younger people, and the traditional methods we've got used to, particularly Facebook. One day Facebook will die. You know, one day it will. We can't see it at the moment, but you know, whether it was MySpace or whatever, some other sort, eventually things get replaced by the next thing that comes along. So you can't hang all your marketing on one thing. But if you crack TikTok, let me know. I set up an account and had a look, and it scared the bejeebers out of me.
Do you know what? You know, I had the concept. I know why we need to do it, but I couldn't get my head around it. But this guy's he understands all that stuff, and he's going to get his team, and we will go at it, because to me it's the only thing we can do. And I want King Voodoo in front of these kids. You know, the Hell's Addictions, the Theas, the Blitzes, you know, the Gallows Circus. I don't give a shit who it is. Suppose it's country music and it's Dave Rosewood, one of my other guys. I don't care. I'll tell you, Ian's heard the story before. One of the country guys that I worked with was a guy called Dave Rosewood, a big American. And he came over here to do some gigs in Liverpool. And my daughter and her friend were like 12, coming 13 at the time. They came downstairs, and Dave, before he went out, is in the living room with his acoustic guitar, warming up, playing, singing, and the two of them were mesmerised. So much so that a year later, when it came to their parties in some local pub, they actually had Dave, the DJ, played Dave on the playlists because they'd never seen it. And these are kids that listen to, you know, Capital Radio, but because they'd never seen it, it woke them up to what it's like to really create music, and they loved it. And that's the magic that we need to get out there.
Yeah, because they don't need, you know, that's why I think genres is a dangerous thing at the moment, and pigeonholing things, because the kids don't care really what it's called. They like it or they don't. And if you play something and they like it, and then you say, "Oh, that's hard rock," you know, then it's almost a turn off. But they like it.
Yeah, so, they don't care. They don't care if it's grime, if it's trap, if it's whatever.
Exactly. They'll like all of it. They haven't just got to be like, you know. But I think if we get Ian doing some funny dances, you know, that can be done on the TikTok, you're onto a winner there, mate. I think, you know.
To be honest with you, just get Ian to walk, so it's funny enough.
Wait a minute, wait, Keith. I'll do a funny dance on TikTok if I'm joined by you, mate.
Yeah, no worries, mate. You've seen me.
I'll put my best dress on and I'll come down and we will dance on TikTok when we get together then, mate.
Yeah, you're on. My pride has long since left the building. My job in life is to humiliate my kids as much as possible. So yeah,
the reason why we have kids, Keith, is to embarrass them. Yeah. The only reason why I have kids, and I still live by that. No, my grandchildren I can embarrass as well. It's easy.
Absolutely. Go for it. Yeah, you're on, Ian. I'll remember this.
Definitely. What a way to end the show. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We have had Keith from WDFD Records. Keith, it's been a pleasure. Before you go, do you want to share your links to your website, your Facebook, your Twitter, your TikTok, where we will do our dance?
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you guys. It's really been a pleasure. I've enjoyed that. Apologies if I've waffled on. Somebody's listening back and thinking, Jesus, he didn't answer that question. If anybody does want to get in touch, ask anything, please do. Contact me through, WDFD Records on Facebook, WDFDrecords.com website. Twitter handle is the same, WDFD Records, and Instagram. Also publish things on LinkedIn. TikTok, you can stuff that for the time being. So, yeah.
But only for the
there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. What I'll do is I'll put the links down below. They'll be down there somewhere.
We'll have a grand launch, Ian. WDFD featuring Ian and Keith. Yeah, that'll be it.
I'll sell the tickets.
We're on, lads.
I'm going to get you on stage with us then for the King Voodoo dance off. It's on, baby. John, over to you, mate. Let's end this show properly.
Well, all that's left to say, guys, is until the next time, we've been the Scouser and the Scot, And until next time, hit that cowbell, subscribe.